Welcome to another episode of Moving Forward Talk with Diana. I am Dr. Diana Clark, your host. This week with me, I have Lieutenant Tyrone Tyson. It's a pleasure to have you, Lieutenant.
Good to be here.
The purpose of this platform is to motivate others to become proactive into shaping their future without limitation. Barriers don't win. We conquer them, set goals, and thrive to achieve those goals. Lieutenant Tyson is attached to the Highlands County Sheriff's Office. Lieutenant Tyson, please give us a background of yourself.
Well, good evening. I am Lieutenant Tyrone Tyson. I work for the Highlands County Sheriff's Office here in Sebring, Florida. I'm currently the lieutenant of the Cops Adapt Unit, which is our local community-oriented police unit. I started in law enforcement back approximately in 1990, ending 95, beginning 96. And I originally served with the Arcadia Police Department. Excuse me. And during that time, I spent approximately 4.5 years working in DeSoto County. Four of those years, I was attached to the DeSoto County Drug Task Force as a narcotics detective. I left DeSoto County. I came to work back in my home county of Highlands. When I joined the Highlands County Sheriff's Office, I did a short stint in road patrol. I did a stint in school resource as a drill instructor at the boot camp. And then I went to Criminal Investigations Division, where I performed the job as a property as well as a person crime detective, as a supervisor and as a detective, and to work my way up through until I got promoted to a rank of lieutenant, which is my current duty assignment.
Excellent. So you have over 25 years of experience in the criminal justice system, from being a police officer until now a lieutenant.
Correct.
How did you choose your career path?
I actually chose my career. I had several gentlemen that was considered my mentors, even though they might have not known it at the time, but I looked at them and I looked up to them because of what they did, and the job that they performed was deputy sheriff for the Highlands County Sheriff's Office. One of those gentlemen is Lieutenant James Jones. He was a homicide detective. He was with Highlands County Sheriff's Office for several years and made a great impact on his community in that capacity. And then from a street level patrol perspective, I interacted quite often with at the time, Deputy Sheriff, I don't mess his name up, Daryl Scott. He was a patrol deputy for the Sheriff's Office. He later became an animal control director, but he was constantly in my neighborhood. He patrolled the zone where I lived. And then the gentleman later came, the Sheriff, Howie Godwin, was a mentor for me, because he's the same thing with him. He would be patrolling our neighborhood, and almost every day that he was out there, we were stopping, riding bicycles, and we were parked beside the police car talking to him and grilling him with all kinds of questions about being the cops. So those guys really gave me some inspiration to do what I do. I learned at an early age that law enforcement officers made people feel safe, and especially for me as a kid. So that's kind of what got me motivated to go into law enforcement.
Excellent. So you had a lot of influence, a lot of positive motivators.
Yes. And later on, I didn't mention that my older brother became a law enforcement officer in Wauchula. And then he eventually left there and went to work for the Department of Correction, where he retired from. So that law enforcement kind of became, I guess, we're the first generation for my family to be involved in law enforcement. And it was a platform that was shown to us, and it has done us very well. It served us well, and we can only hope that we've served the community well.
So as we can see, the research that state that we imitate those who we look up to, you are very much a prime example of that.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Share with us some of the barriers that are some of the struggles that you may have experienced while pursuing your career?
Well, some of the initial struggles were finances for the family. It was we didn't have very much. There was times where my family, we went to work as a family in the orange grove picking fruit. We worked in the nursery where my parents spent most of their lives working at. They were both hard workers. Unfortunately, the work they did didn't pay very much, so we as a family had to chip in and contribute. And as a family, we did make it through together. So finances is always a big issue because kind of when you start with nothing, you've got to start from the very ground floor. You've got to make something out of nothing. And that was probably one of the biggest struggles. And then probably self-initiated consequence I gave myself was by being as a young adult or young youth, should I say, because I wasn't quite an adult. I had my first child, and that brought its own set of special set of circumstances because now I had to become very responsible for another life and not just my own. So with those things, the financial situation and the true fact of is, my parents were both hard workers, but they didn't have the traditional education. So they didn't know how to guide me down that path of going to, and I didn't have the support from any other adults or my school system to show me, even though I was a decent student, made decent grades, honor roll, whatever, I didn't have that guidance to guide me right into that path of college so I would have an upper hand in life. So I really had to kind of just maneuver and find my way to try to be successful, learning about how to obtain financial aid, learning about how to apply for school to get into the police academy, and then obviously the continuing education after that. So, it wasn't easy. I didn't have the guidance, but with the based on my faith and with the help of Christ, I was able to navigate through it. The most important factor, I never gave up.
That's the most important thing. Sometimes, we use the lack of the financial support, the lack of the parental guidance in some areas, because the lack of education, we use that to cripple us from moving forward when all we need to do is, as you did, seek out some resources and, push your way through it. What were some tools that you used to help you move beyond some of those barriers?
Well, I would definitely say faith first and foremost. I knew Christ at the time as a young man, and I know that I wanted to be better than what my average peers were turning out to be in the instance or essence of the things that they were being involved in that was not good. And so having faith was great. The other big thing is that I had positive peers. All my friends in my close circle, they did something with their lives. They went to the Air Force, Army, in some cases the Navy, or joined a governmental entity to work. So those are guys that we grew up with, and we supported each other, and we didn't allow each other to do dumb things that will sidetrack or derail our potential chances of success. So peers were great, and self-discipline. It takes self-discipline. You can have the best friends in the world, but you've got to have discipline for yourself to be motivated, to stay focused, and to make sure you avoid those traps that are set out there for each and every individual that we can fall in that will sidetrack your life and take you down a path that you can never recover from. And then on top of it all, it was the respect that I had for my parents. There is no way in the world I wanted to disappoint or disrespect or make the people that gave me and put forward so much into my life to make them embarrassed or feel ashamed of me for doing something stupid.
And with that being said, I'm going to quote something from the social bonding theory, and I'm not going to quote it word for word, but it states somewhere in social bonding theory, it states that when you have that social bond with your parents, or when you have social bond within the community, if you don't, even if you don't, if you're not motivated to become successful for yourself, you're motivated to become successful for them because you don't want to let them down.
Definitely, that was definitely true in my case. Absolutely.
Now, being attached to the Highlands County Sheriff's Office for over 25 years, what are some of the concerns that you have with the systematic racism? How does that impact your service within your community?
Well, I'm kind of blessed and cursed in a way because as a minority, a black male in law enforcement, I can see and I have felt both sides of the systematic racism that unfortunately present in throughout our nation. It's not isolated to any areas or any particular locations. It's something that's been ingrained in us as people from day one. So I do relate to both sides. As a law enforcement officer, I can completely understand some of the decisions that must be made as law enforcement officer to keep people safe, so that you can keep people out of harm's way, and so that you and your fellow law enforcement officers return home safely to their families by having to stop the bad guys or the aggressors, to stop to hurt people or destroy people. And then on the other side, I can also definitely relate to those instances of injustice where people have been unfairly over-policed, unfairly incarcerated, or just incarcerated when incarceration wasn't the answer. So I can see both sides. I know that it happens, and it just gives me more motivation to be involved in the process, to try to be a voice of good in the system, so that as the world changes, as things start to, as people start to realize what those injustices are, I will be a part of the solution.
And even being in law enforcement as a minority, I am sure there are times when, you know, your assistant probably de-escalates some situation that could have went the wrong way.
Absolutely. That is, you know, one of the crucial things of being a law enforcement officer is you have got to be able to use discretion. Right. As a law enforcement officer. There are times to arrest, there are times to fight people for citations, and there are times just to talk and counsel people and talk them down. So every situation do not involve a situation where someone needs to be arrested. Now, keep in mind, now there clearly are those times where there are people that you encounter or deal with that clearly need to be incarcerated, either for their own good or the good of the public. However, there are times when you've got some people, no matter what race or nationality they are, that might make that mistake, that first mistake in their life, that you can intervene and, you know, opposed to arresting them, you can educate them. You can give them that first and that second opportunity to still be successful and not necessarily derail their life. So when you see that you got that first time offender, no matter what race or nationality they are, you can be the person to help them become something better, and you just might be the person that saved that person's life and put them on the right path.
Absolutely, because sometimes you're law enforcement, and I'm sure you find yourself advocating for some and social changing for the others.
Absolutely.
What are some plans in action for the Highlands County Sheriff's Office to continue to improve their relationship within our community?
Well, the Highlands County Sheriff's Office has taken a pretty good proactive stance on this under the leadership of Sheriff Paul Blackman, who actually had the ideal to create the COPS ADAPT unit, which stands for Community-Oriented Police Services. ADAPT stands for Achieving Diversity and Public Trust. This was his brainchild to bring this to our community, and I think it's been one of the best things that has happened, because we actually have the opportunity to pull ourselves away from those calls for service where deputies running from one call to another call to another call, putting out fires and not solving problems, to actually giving us opportunity to go into communities, identify problems, find helpful solutions by working with members of the community, and investing in our youth. We spend a large amount of our time with youth. And the reason for that is because we want to change that transformation of the youth in the community looking at law enforcement as the bad guys, because truly we're not the bad guys. We are simply community members that wear a uniform for a certain amount of hours throughout the day. And when we're not in uniform, we're the same people that you go to the grocery store with, that you might sit beside in church, and that might be part of your political organization. So we try to show our community that it's not the Howard County Sheriff's Office versus the community, but we're one entity that works together. And actually, the Howard County Sheriff's Office belongs to the people, and we want the people to have a hand in their policing. So our biggest thing that we're trying to do right now is reduce gun violence, which is out of control. That's another topic we spend a lot of time on. Mm-hmm. We got a lot of youth that are killing and hurting and maiming each other up, and it's completely simple. And then the other thing we're trying to do is reduce that gun violence and get guns off the streets, out of the hands of these young people that are hurting each other. But we're also trying to build positive, trust-based relationships with all members of our community.
And you mentioned sometimes, law enforcement are perceived as the bad guys. Are there any policies, been in law enforcement for over 25 years, are there any policies that you would recommend implementing to hold officers who are not following protocols?
Well, initially, the bottom line is supervisors, they must hold their subordinates accountable. If you've got a subordinate that's violating minor rules and policies, then you've got to go ahead and immediately address that issue. And you reprimand, you coach, you counsel, and you train that subordinate to immediately rectify that misconduct and bad behavior. And if it's a rise to a higher level that of a person that should not be retained by an agency, you've got to terminate that person and get that virus out of your organization. Because no matter what anybody you look at in life, any affiliation, organization, we're gonna have bad people. We're gonna have bad doctors, bad lawyers, bad cops, and so on. It just happens, but you must identify and immediately remove that person so you're not guilty of negative retention.
Accountability. What would be some advice that you would give to minorities who are considering pursuing a law enforcement career, but is plagued by the belief of the systematic racism within
within criminal justice or law enforcement in general? Well, like we already talked about,
right?
We can acknowledge. Give me one second. No, I'm good. Thank you. Sorry. Mm-hmm. We can acknowledge that it happened. It's reality. It's real life. So it's kind of like politics. If you don't like your politics, if you don't like what's happening in your community, get a voice. Vote or get involved and join the fray. If you don't like what's going on with your policing in your local communities, and you feel like minorities are being unfairly abused or disrespected, then I encourage every person out there that's watching this to understand that you do have a voice. And that voice means that you can get involved. I would highly encourage that person to join their local law enforcement agency so that they can be a difference maker and not just simply sit back and watch and complain about the injustices that are going on, but you can be that person to make a difference. And if you do that, then ultimately the system is going to level out and we will have a fair representation of the people that have your viewpoints involved in the organization that's making these decisions that you don't like.
Right.
So basically say if you don't like it, join it.
Join it. Because the changes are always from within. So staying outside, complaining and doing nothing, usually do not foster change. Change is from within.
That's absolutely true. Yes.
this is moving forward. So what is your future goal as it relates to your career?
For me, I'm fairly deep into my career. All I want to do at this point is see that the new deputies that's coming up in the ranks behind me, that they're well trained, they're well prepared, and all of the differences, in modern policing. It's not just, nightstick and billy clubbing to get compliance. It's de-escalation.
Right.
It's counseling when you need to. It's being authoritative when you need to. Authoritative. So, but you've got to be able to know when to use these tools. And if they've got all the tools and they know how to use them, I don't have any doubt that they will take our organization and any law enforcement organization to the next level of being a modern police organization. There's no doubt that we're going to always need police in our society because there are bad guys out there intent on hurting people. And when that happens, you will always want to be able to call someone that's willing to come and confront that bad act. And we're going to always need police. So you will never not have the police, but get involved and support your law enforcement that's being transparent and doing good things in the community. Be a part of anything that they're offering so that you can bring a voice to the situation and help be a solution to the problem. So I would highly recommend that any of the young people out there that's considering law enforcement or any other career field that might help in their local community, that they get educated. Education is a continuing thing. You don't ever stop getting educated, no matter how much education you have. You will continue to learn and you can always become better. And education is one thing that no one can take from you. So utilize that education to take you and use it to propel you to any level that you want to be in life.
Great. Are you mentoring anyone now?
I do have a mentor. Apparently the program is postponed through the school. So yes, I do have a mentor. In fact, several of my deputies in the cops unit have mentors.
Absolutely. That's absolutely, that is very good because we have to groom them. So it is that someone groomed you and influenced you to become a part of the criminal justice system. So it is that you need to do the same for someone else.
I sure will. Thank you very much.
And I just want to say thank you for taking your time to share on Moving Forward Talk with Diana. And I do personally want to thank you for all you have been doing within our community. You are doing a great job in the community, and the Highlands County Sheriff's Office is doing a wonderful job serving and protecting our community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining Moving Forward Talk with Diana.
Take care.